What's up, guys? Welcome back to Semojo Homestead. We are so glad that you're here with us today because we really want to talk about and focus on something that we feel like is very important, especially moving ahead and with some of the forecasts that are out there. And no, I'm not talking about weather forecasts.
Yeah.
So this is going to be one that we're just going to kind of talk and share some information. So feel free to just sit down and listen. But we want to talk about, and the turkeys agree, the 3 vegetables that we feel like are most important to grow for sustainability.
But first, if you're new here, we want to thank you for hanging out with us and being a part of our channel.
Yes.
If you haven't become part of our YouTube family, we just invite you to do that by subscribing, being a part of the homestead, and just thank you guys for hanging out with us in the garden today.
And the turkeys are chiming in because they want you to know that they are going to be the star of the show next week on our video. They might just not know why they're the star of the show. So be sure to tune in next week for that, because this is our first year raising turkeys. We've kind of been following along on that journey and just doing sort of a separate turkey series on that. But next week is the big day.
Yep.
But let's talk about garden vegetables.
Yeah.
So the reason why we think this is so important and why we want to talk about it is because if you're not paying attention too much, like they are forecasting inflation to continue next year, and for there to be just a lot more vulnerability in the stocks. So this isn't something we really talk about a ton on here because, one, we're not big in fear mongering, and that's not what this is about at all. And 2, I mean, we like to try to keep this channel focused on just being encouraging, uplifting, and sort of trying to avoid some of that, but also acknowledging the reality of it. Yeah. This one, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it because we do feel like with the talk that's out there and everything else that, I mean, food, growing your own food and trying to be financially wise is even more important. So we wanted to focus on these 3 because of that. The reality is, like, people are struggling. Right. On average, since 2019, groceries have gone up 30%, which, let's just do basic math here. So for every $100 spent now, you're spending $30 more than you would have just a couple of years ago on groceries. No one has a $100 grocery bill, especially if you have a family. Yeah. So, you know, you take that to $500, that's almost $150 more for every $500 you're spending on groceries. So because it's happened over several years, like, yeah, people are realizing that their money's not going as far with food, but I think that we lose, like, the reality of, like, really how much less farther it's going on food.
When we first started really paying attention to our finances, we were spending $500 a month for a family of 4, and people couldn't wrap their hands around how we were doing that then. Right. So I know.
And that was back like 2016, 2015.
Right. So I know that it probably feels pretty impossible to do right now in today's world. So
yes, just total transparency here. Like, we have pretty much become hands off at the grocery store. Right. So that is like a little bit of a foreign concept to me. Like, oh my gosh, like, I don't, like, personally, I don't even understand how people are affording groceries right now. Right. Period. Yeah. Point blank. People need to be growing food. And why they need to start if they haven't already, like, just learning to grow food. The other side of this is it's also no secret that now all these labels are showing up with bioengineered product in there. In America, our food is becoming less and less healthy, and we're sacrificing more and more nutrients in it. And so that alone should be motivation enough for people to start growing a garden. And we are hoping that in this video, it empowers you to feel like you can do that. Yeah. Because a lot of people and a lot of friends we talk to say they want to, but they don't feel like they can or have the ability to or have the confidence even to grow food. So.
Right. Now is when you can start preparing your infrastructure, even if it's just one raised bed, for when planting time rolls around you are ready and your space is ready for planting. Now, a lot of people could argue, I'm sure, as to whether or not these would be the 3 they would choose. But the reason why we chose them is, in my experience of growing from small scale in a patio community with only a few raised beds to this, these are 3 things that yield a lot, and they provide a lot of nutritional value. They are versatile, and they can fill a belly.
Yes.
So that is what I think about as a mom with 3 kids. I want to look at what's going to give me the most bang for my buck with what I'm growing.
And things that are relatively easy to grow.
Right, exactly.
Everybody, when they start getting into gardening, thinks like automatically tomatoes. Spoiler alert, tomatoes are not on this list.
No.
So let's just jump into the list.
Okay, so the first plant I would focus on is squash. Specifically for me personally, it's yellow crookneck squash. That's something that is super versatile in its flavoring. You might say, hold up, I hate squash. I have children that actually don't love it, but there are recipes and ways to use it that you can actually transform the flavor. One just off the top of my head that I do really fast, just to throw it out there, is I boil the squash down in stock, and then I mix it with butter, cheese, and cream cheese, or whatever I have on hand, and all my kids love it. So
good.
Yeah. The other reason why I would say squash is when we were really struggling financially in the other house, one thing I would do is I would grate the squash or put it in my Vitamix, and I would beef up a soup or a sauce with it. And my kids didn't even really know that their sauce didn't have meat in it, that it only had squash in it. And it became almost a meat replacement for our diet, and it also can be used as like a lasagna noodle replacement in a lasagna dish. So
you would say it would
versatile.
be good for like stretching something farther, so you're not having to use
100%.
as much of like spaghetti sauce if you're buying that in the store.
Right, or of your meat. Like you could take a half a pound of meat and beef it up with squash and save that other half a pound for another meal. The other reason why I would say this yellow crookneck squash is it's super easy to preserve. If you can't can, you don't have a freeze dryer, you blanch it and put it in the freezer, or you grate it and squeeze out the water and put it in the freezer. It's a very easy introductory plant or vegetable, and it's super easy to manage pest-wise if you use BT. For squash borers, I know those have been an issue in our garden. Honestly, it's because we haven't been on top of spraying with BT. BT is not expensive. It's easy to spray on your plants. It's organic, and it's a great option for keeping that pest load down.
The second vegetable would be potatoes.
Yes.
And I'm going to throw sweet potatoes in here. If you saw our last week video, you know that sweet potatoes aren't exactly in the potato family, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to clump them all in one. So potatoes are fairly easy to grow, especially if you have a raised bed, which I would say if you've never grown them before, they're going to be a lot easier to grow in a raised bed because they like to have that loose soil. Now they do have potato bags. You don't necessarily have to buy those. You could just get a big pot. Typically, if you go to like a local nursery, they'll have leftover pots. Now I would say definitely go with like a 15-gallon pot, but that way you can keep that soil loose. You know all those potatoes are in there, so harvest time comes and it's a lot easier. One thing with potatoes, and I am talking about specifically potatoes right now, is that you really want to pay attention to determinate versus indeterminate. If you're not familiar with those terms, determinate means that potato has a determined amount that it's going to produce. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to like every plant's going to produce 5 potatoes and be done. But what you need to know in that is that you basically will sprout the seed potato, bury it, put the dirt over it, follow the instructions, and then you leave it in the ground and let it produce potatoes. Because once it produces or gets to a certain stage, it's going to be done. Whereas an indeterminate variety, you're going to do the same thing, sprout your seed potato, plant it, but those are the ones that you're going to have to hill up or add dirt to as it grows, because it will continue as long as the stem is buried to put off potatoes along that stem in an indeterminate amount. of time and number. And so both have their benefits. One, obviously, with an indeterminate, you're going to have to keep going back and adding soil. But the other one, you can put it in the ground and basically forget about it until it's done. What we have found with potatoes and pest is that our biggest issue has been disease, which is like a potato wilt that gets on them. There are things that you can spray. Neem oil fights off a lot of that stuff. Typically, if it's not already in your area, so if you haven't ever grown potatoes, or if you're in a neighborhood and don't have like a garden area, you're probably going to be fine with that. The other thing that I would say with potatoes, if you've never grown them before, is when to harvest them. Well, when the tops start to yellow and die off, that's when it's time to harvest them. And so you can dig those up and they will last for a long time if you get them in a cool, dark place.
So with potatoes, just to reinforce, like your biggest hindrance would be if your soil is not loose, or if you got indeterminate and don't continue to put the soil on it.
Right. They are definitely one you want to have like some type of raised bed pot or something to grow them in. Sweet potatoes are going to be a summer long crop. So your potatoes are going to be more kind of in that cooler weather, whereas sweet potatoes are going to grow through the summertime. And at the end of the summertime, when we start getting cold, again, tops are going to start to die off, turn yellow, you harvest them then. And so you can have some overlap in your growing season, but also fill those gaps as well. So about time you're running out of potatoes, your sweet potatoes are coming in. Same thing, they last a long time if you put them in a cool, dark area. We have never had pest problems on our sweet potatoes. There is something called potato beetle, which can affect both of them, but we in South Carolina, here at our location, thankfully have never really had to worry about those. One way that you can deter those pests is actually our next crop that Cass is going to talk about.
So that's another crop that can fill a belly, is super versatile, and also has a lot of great vitamins and minerals for your family. The last crop I want to talk about is beans. So your bush beans, we plant them.
Beans, good for your heart. More. Sorry.
Anyway, you actually can plant them with your potatoes. They're a great companion plant for potatoes. They confuse the potato beetle, so they help with that. The reason why I feel like that's another good crop to have in your garden is specifically the bush bean variety. You can get a lot of beans from one plant. They don't require a huge garden layout. You can have a couple plants and get a pretty significant amount. And again, if you pair a bean, any kind of a bean with rice, it's a complete protein. So when things are maybe hard or people are strapped, you can make some beans and rice and have a good filling meal. Throw in a little bit of meat for protein, and you do have a really good belly filling meal that's going to provide your family with the vitamins and nutrients that they need. Green beans can just go through a simple blanching and freezing process.
Yes.
So if you don't have any way to can, or you're hesitant of canning, boil them for a couple minutes, get them in an ice bath, and then you can freeze them, and they will last for a full long time in your freezer.
So obviously all of these were kind of just focusing on side items.
Yeah.
Sweet potato or even the squash, if done right, and maybe throw in a couple other ingredients, really could be like a one dish only thing.
Yeah.
But the thing that we're stressing here is supplementing what you have to buy at the grocery store.
Right, exactly.
You know, and things are going to be sustainable. They're actually going to provide like substance on your belly and give you something of nutritional value. To where you're not having to rely so much on having to buy all these other sides or whatever to go with a meal. So obviously, like if you're wanting to like grow more stuff, you can.
Yes, of course.
These are just like the three things that we would say and that we would tell our friends who are like
what
just jumping in
Yeah.
or looking for ways to start supplementing, because we, in our experience, again, like these have been some of the easiest crops for us to grow. So why would you not grow tomatoes?
So me personally, I love tomatoes, and a tomato sandwich is like a household favorite here. But if I'm talking about like having to pull what from the garden to make a meal, tomatoes, if I have a bunch of tomatoes, I could make tomato soup, but I couldn't make something that would fill a very hungry belly. I have 2 teenage girls that dance and a 6-year-old that I think is growth spurting. So
definitely.
A meal of tomatoes, if that's all we had, wouldn't fill them. Am I always going to grow tomatoes? 100% yes. I want to be able to have that spaghetti sauce or salsa or whatever, or throw it in a soup or a stew. But as far as carrying us over from one meal to the next, I don't feel like tomatoes can do that on a consistent basis. Also, there isn't as much variety that I could do in the kitchen with a bucket of tomatoes like I could with something like a potato or a crookneck squash that doesn't have a super overpowering flavor on its own.
Kind of the same with the peppers. Like, they're a great add-in, great flavor enhancer or something like that. But as far as being able to really hold its own on like a plate, they just can't do it. It's not going to hold up to these other things. So the 3 that we threw out there, they're great for just adding to any kind of dish and stretching it, making it go farther, or can hold up on its own very well as a side, but also provide enough nutrients or like that kind of heavy starch comfort type thing on your stomach to really make a family feel full.
This is something that we are looking at in the perspective of, if you need to cut your grocery bill down. We're not saying, we expect everyone to totally be able to cut out the grocery store.
Right.
But if you want to really make a dent in that grocery bill, these are 3 really good crops that you could grow that can help you do that.
Yes, and none of them take up a ton of room.
Right.
So even in your traditional neighborhoods, you can easily grow this in a raised bed or something like that. And the other great thing is all 3 of these things can be planted together and grown together, not like a squash section, a bean section.
That's a great point.
But like all interplanted, and they're all going to help each other, and they're all going to benefit from each other. And it will help to keep those pests down, so you may not even have to rely on any type of organic treatment for those things.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I really hope this stuff helps you, and again, empowers you. If you have been one of those people that are just kind of like on the edge about growing food or wanting to do it, I hope this empowers you to get out there and try it and just see what a difference it can make in your grocery bill. Even a little bit of a dent can help.
Let's do some highs and lows.
Yes. So if you are new with us, we always like to do highs and lows on our weekend video, which is just when we get to share like what our high moment of the week was and what our low moment of the week was.
So my low, I think, would be that Sayla and I had an orthopedic appointment on Friday, and she is going to have to wear a brace for a significant amount of the day. If you haven't followed us, if you're new, she has scoliosis, and we're trying to really get it under control. And in order to do that, the next 6 months, she's going to be wearing a brace for the better part of her days. As a mom, I have obviously some concerns about that. I have concerns about how that will make her feel and all the things associated with that, but ultimately her health is the most important thing. So we are just doing what we got to do from this point on, trusting the Lord with the rest.
Yes.
My high would be that Jeremy had a birthday this week. And I might be spoiling it for him, but is that I was able to kind of sneak in a surprise experience for him for his birthday. And we were we had the opportunity to go and do a cupping, which I had never done before, with Beulah Coffee. And that was awesome.
That was pretty cool.
That was a very fun experience. Yeah. So I was super thankful to Jess for allowing us to do that as a fun little birthday celebration, and for Daniel for the experience. It was just a lot of fun. So that was definitely a high.
Yeah. Speaking of Jess.
Yes.
Cass is on the podcast this week.
Yes. Yeah.
So
okay,
catch that.
Jess.
Yeah. The turkeys agree too. They say catch it also.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is being released to the general public on Wednesday. So be sure to check that out, Roots of Refuge, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about. Yeah. My high would be my birthday and feeling better.
Yes.
Last week was rough, guys. Like the few windows that I had that I felt good, that's when you saw me on the video. But yes, got better in time for my birthday, got to enjoy it, got back to work. Like it was a great week because last week was horrible. So it was a good follow-up to that. And yes, the surprise cupping experience, all of that stuff, that was a ton of fun as well that we got to do kind of as a date.
Yeah,
it was fun.
That was fun.
My low would be, even though I felt better, like I had a sore throat for the majority of last week, just sort of lingering. It's gone now, thankfully, but just really, really sore. That was a little bit rough. That would probably be my low, is that it was just kind of like, even though I was feeling better, it was a reminder of like, yeah, you were sick, but hey, I'm over it now. So we're all good.
We're good. So that's all we have for you. Every time I go to John.
She's clapping.
I know. It's like, who needs a light?
Clap on. Clap.
They don't like you. Anyway,
So
thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a great week and be blessed.